Hey, my name is Ben, and in this video I'm going to talk about a couple of new virtual instruments I made. A month ago I released an instrument called String Flow, and a bunch of people really liked it. So I decided to expand that instrument to include about twice as much content, and I also re-recorded all of the content that was there before because I wanted to make it sound better. And I did this for a violin version of the instrument and for a viola version. This past month I also had a lot of fun playing around with this 150-year-old bass. Hopefully I'll be releasing that pretty soon too. I just need to finish the interface. But anyways, just to recap, the first string flow instrument had a bunch of chords in it where I played them like this. And then I did some scripting so that you could play triads and you would get the corresponding chord from cello. You can do this in multiple inversions. I'm just arbitrarily playing in C major, but it could be any key. So that's everything that the first instrument could do. Now in the expanded version, I also added these closed position triads, as well as these lovely 7th chord voicings. And last but not least, I recorded open fifths. All of these voicings and inversions have been recorded at 2 velocity layers. Both of the velocity layers has a normale version and a ponticello version. You can use the mod wheel to crossfade between the two. Because all of these extended string flow instruments have so many chord voicings, it's especially helpful to have the key switch mode. Once you turn key switch mode on, these purple, orange, and blue key switches light up. So now you just play on the white keys in C major, and then you let the purple keys control what key things are being transposed into. So now we're in D major, and E major. The orange keys control which inversion you're in, which only applies to the open and closed voicings. The blue keys at the top control which voicing you're playing with. With the key switch mode, it seemed like kind of a waste to not have the black keys do anything, so I decided to have them trigger notes with the open fifths voicing. As I was messing around with it, I discovered some really interesting harmonies when you combine the black and white keys. The other thing that I've provided to make sure you get the most out of everything that's in this instrument is MIDI clips. So I've made a folder which has all of the possible chords, and they're all just like in C major. You could just drag them into the project and then transpose them around, combine them. And once they're in there, you could like change their velocity, so you get the different velocity layer, or you could if you like working with a mouse, you could do some automation of the mod wheel. They're all in separate MIDI clips, but I also made a giant MIDI clip that has them all together. Now that you know how to use the instrument, I wanted to go into more depth about the new voicings that I added, because there's some pretty neat things I discovered while I was playing around with them. Usually the cello is tuned in fifths, C, G, D, A. If you tune the D and A string down a half step, the two bottom strings are C and G, and then the two top strings are also C and G again, an octave higher. It takes a little while to get it in tune, but once you have it, there's some interesting things you can do with the harmonics. If you go up to a really high harmonic and then do that on all four strings, it sounds pretty nice when you roll across the strings like this. And it's really cool if you have multiple of them together. If you offset them by an eighth note, it sounds really nice too. This type of thing is really easy to do with the open fifths voicing I added to all of the string flow instruments. You can get some really rich harmonies with it. What's happening harmonically with the fifths is that when you take one fifth and then you have another one that overlaps with it, it makes different types of seventh chords. So here's how this sounds with the other instruments. Next, here's the violin. It has a much brighter sound because of the E string. I especially enjoy the violin's high range. Interestingly enough, for these open fifths voicings, the cello version actually goes about as high as the violin and viola version. Those high harmonics work a lot better on cello than on violin and viola. The harmonics have a really different tone quality than the high range of the violin. If you remember from before, the cello sounded like this up there. And here's the violin. What's really great about making virtual instruments like this is that they allow you to create things that would be pretty much impossible to do in real life. The next voicing I'm going to talk about is a good example of this. We'll call this the closed voicing because all the notes are pretty close together. If you were to try to play this voicing on two strings, you'd have to do something like this. It's really awkward. Or like this. If you were to do this on three strings, it's way easier. And in this case, I can do it on three strings because I have the open D string. This works great for this chord, but for other chords, not so much because you don't have the open D string. But I figured out a different tuning, and then if I contort my hand really far apart, I could actually get all the chords. So it's interesting playing around with these sounds that you wouldn't normally be able to get from the cello. I really enjoy the sense of hushed excitement that you can get from these, and it's also a nice contrast to the open chords. Here's what these closed chords sound like with the viola instrument. Here's something you could do with the closed voicing on violin. The last set of voicings I'd like to talk about are the seventh chords, and I don't have too much to say about these. So I think what they add to this instrument is smooth harmonies. So far it's been very blocky 1, 3, 5 stuff, but it's nice to have those like kind of sweet, sort of jazzy sounding harmonies in there. And you can walk it around a lot more easily. Because if you were to do that with something like this, sounds really dumb, but works really well here. And you could do your standard 2-5-1, you know, or a nice spicy tritone substitution. Oops, there we go. Yeah. Well, I think that covers just about everything about the instruments. So if you have any questions, just let me know. And thanks for watching.